So in this video, we're going to create a Hiker's Watch app, which will show a hiker all the possible information that they could want to have about their location, all provided conveniently on their phone. And this is what it's going to look like. So we've got the latitude, longitude, accuracy, speed, bearing, altitude, and their local address as well. You might notice too that I've got a fancy full screen background here with no title, which I think looks pretty good. With a little bit of Googling, you should be able to figure out how to do that. It's just adding one line. But of course, if you can't find it, just go to the relevant point in the video and I'll show you how it's done. Of course, all the information updates automatically when you do a new geofix. There we go. So new address, new location, etc. Some of the information isn't available on the emulator, but would definitely work if you were on a real device. All right, best of luck. I'll give you a few moments to pause the video and make the app. Okay, I hope you managed that. Here we go. I'm going to start, of course, with a new project, and I'll call it Hiker's Watch. And we can stick with API 22 because we're not using a map here, and a blank activity will work just fine. Okay. So before we create the UI of our app, I'm going to go over to mainActivity.java and create the code which will enable us to see all the information that we can get from this location object to display on our Hiker's Watch screen. So let's start by quickly adding the code to get the user's location. We should be pretty comfortable with this by now. So we'll start with implements location listener to allow us to use all the code to get the user's location, and then we'll use the light bulb to import the necessary methods for us. Then we'll add the variables that we know we're going to need. So first of all, we'll create a location manager called location manager and a string which will keep track of the provider that we're using. Then in onCreate, we'll set up location manager. It's going to be a location manager, and we're going to get it from the system service using context to get the app context and location service. As we add that, we'll pop over to the manifest and add the necessary permissions for that. So access find location, and in case that's not available, we'll access the course location as well. There we go. Back over to our mainActivity.java. Then we'll create our provider and set it equal to location manager dot get best provider, and then we'll create some new criteria which are just empty criteria because we're not going to specify any criteria, and we're not going to specifically look for ones that are enabled. Whoops, there we go. Okay, now we're just going to add our code here to get the latitude and longitude for now. So location.getLatitude, and all these other ones are the other bits of information that we're going to get later on to display on our app. And the longitude is location.getLongitude. Oh, I think I've used the wrong type there actually. I think there should be doubles. We could use floats, but double is the type that these are returned in by default, so we might as well use that. And then as before, I'll just give the latitude. so that we know we're okay. And then we'll be good, responsible users of location, and on pause, we'll stop listening for the location. So location manager, remove updates, and then this. And on resume, we'll set them up again. So location manager dot request location updates using the provider, and then same settings as before. So every 400 milliseconds, every 1 meter, and this is our context. All right. Let's now check that. While that's compiling, I'll get the terminal set up, ready to telnet into the simulator. And here we go. So my app is running. You can see I've got 5554 again as my number. So telnet local host 5554, and I'm in. And then geofix 85. There we go, latitude 5.0. Wonderful. So we're all connected up and we're getting the user's location. So let's have a look and see what other information we can get from the location object. So if we go for location dot and then get, I don't think we need to put the accuracy there, but of course you can add it if you like. But altitude I know is something that's of interest. So let's add that one. What else have we got? Bearing, definitely useful. Now we may well have a type issue here. This is a float. That's fine. So we could have cast it to a double or leave it as a float. I'll go for the float option. And then we've got speed there. And I think that's probably the last one I'll get. Time is not particularly interesting because they can get that from their phone easily enough. So I'll leave it as that. We'll see what type that is. It's a float again. And actually, having said what I said about accuracy, that could actually be quite useful. So let's actually put that in after all. I'm guessing a float, but we'll see. Yeah. Okay, so now let's just log all of these. Just to make sure that they are returning a value. And that we can use them. Okay, so we've got lat, lung, altitude, bearing, speed, and accuracy. Okay, let's take a look at that. So now try again, geofix 1017. Let's see what we get. So unfortunately we can't set the altitude, bearing and speed on the emulator, but if you ran this on a real device, those would be non-zero values. So the last bit of information that we want is the address near the location. So we'll do that using the techniques that we learned in the previous lecture. And that is starting off by setting up a geocoder, which we'll call geocoder, which is going to be a new geocoder using the application context and then we'll use the default locale. There we go. Then we'll create a list of addresses, which we'll call list addresses, which is going to be geocoder.get from location, and the location is of course lat, lung, and again we only want the first result there. Let's just import that. And that, and we need to surround that with try and catch because it could fail. Okay, then we'll just do a check to see if list addresses is not null and list addresses dot size is greater than 0, i.e. we have a result. Then we'll log place info dot list addresses dot get the first one and convert it to a string. And just before we run that, we'll need to add the internet permission in the manifest. There it is, because of course we need the internet to get the information about the location. Okay. While that's running, I'll just move us back to good old East Grinstead. Whoops, geofix 051.12, and then let's have a look, see what we've got. Yep, so we've got our address there and all our information about the location. Fantastic. So now it's over to our user interface. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to have a full screen app this time, just to make it look a little bit prettier, as it's not the most interesting app. I hope you managed to figure out how to do that with a Google search. We actually do it in the manifest, and we do it in this part here, which describes our activity, which is essentially our screen that we're working with. And we add an option here, which is Android theme. And then we're going to use symbol and then Android style stash, and then we'll get the themes. So theme dot no title bar dot full screen. So that's just our way of accessing that particular theme with a full screen app with no title bar. Okay, so we've still got the title bar here in activity main.xml, but if we jump over, I'll just run that again, and you can see that it is definitely going full screen there. Notice that that's dark. If we wanted to specify a particular theme, we could do that here as well. So for example, we might use holo.light, and then we just add no action bar this time. Dot full screen. Whoops, not no action bar. There we go. Let's just have a quick look at that. There we go. So now we've got the lighter theme that we're more used to, and to be honest, that I prefer. Okay, so now time to bring our image in. So I'm going to use this nice rugged mountainous image from unsplash.com. So I'm going to save it as usual on the desktop. I'll just call it background. And this time I'll remember to resize it before I import it. So again on a Mac, it's very easy. Just open it up in Preview and then Tools, Adjust Size. And we'll go for a width of maybe 600 pixels, which takes it down substantially. And then I'll save that. Okay, so now we'll import that into our app. So I'm going to open up the drawable folder in Finder and then just drag that in. There we go. And just to check, yep, there it is. Okay, so now we've got our image. Let's make it a nice full screen background. So get rid of our text view and bring in an image view. And we definitely want this to be full screen. So fill parent for both of those. And then let's set the src, the source, to our background. There we go. Let's mess around with the scale type a little. So maybe center crop. That actually looks pretty good. Yep, I think I'm going to stick with that. And let's just run it to check how it actually looks in the emulator. And you can see we've actually got still a little bit of padding here, which we don't really want. It doesn't make our photo look great. So that's easy enough to get rid of. We just go to our relative layout and then find the padding attribute and set that to 0. And that will then remove all of that padding and we'll get our nice full screen image. There we go. Lovely. So now it's just a matter of adding our data. So I'm going to start actually with a title. Let's zoom in a little bit. So I'll just call it Hiker's Watch. And then we need to design that a little bit. So let's try 20 SP. A little larger, 30 SP. And I want the text a bit darker, I think. So generally slightly off black. It's usually a little more attractive than a full black. And then I'm going to add in a top margin of, let's try 10 dps just to move that down a little bit. Great. Okay, so now to add the first bit of information, and we'll start with the latitude, I think. So let's bring that in. We want it centered below Hiker's Watch. And then again, we'll add a top margin of 10 dps. I'll make it a little bit bigger, not quite as big as the title, but let's try 20 SP. Great. And then we'll set the color again to a slightly off black. Okay, and just to see how it's going to look, we'll set the initial latitude to, I don't know, 32.7, and we'll set the ID there as well. Okay. Now, to add another one, rather than add all those settings in again, I'm just going to copy and paste the text and change what we need. So this one's going to be longitude, and I'll change the ID to lung. And then let's have a look. Ah, yes. So we do need to change that this one is not below text view. It's going to be below lat. That's better. Now let's have the speed. So same as before, this one's below lung. And let's just put 4.7 meters per second for now. And we'll change the ID to speed. And I'm actually going to give this one a slightly bigger top margin. Maybe even bigger than that. So that it's kind of separated out so that we've got different sections here. We've got a kind of location section, and we've got a speed or direction section, and then we'll have our address section at the bottom there. So we've got speed. Next we'll have bearing. So bearing something like 086. Give an ID of bearing, and it's below speed. And it has a margin top of 10. Lovely. I've just forgotten what the next one was. So bearing, speed, and accuracy. So actually that would do with going up here, which is not a problem. So let's put it under longitude. So just copy that one down. So margin top of 10. An ID of accuracy. So accuracy, something like 20.0 meters. And then we do need to adjust this one. So this one is not below lung anymore. It's below accuracy. Okay, great. And then finally at the bottom, we'll have our address. So again, we'll have a bigger margin. It's going to be below speed. Have an ID of address. And we'll use /r/n to get a new line. And then let's say 76 Fake Street for now. Just to have a look. Oops, something's gone wrong there. That's because we've got it below speed, where it should be below bearing. Much better. Except I don't think we need that /r actually. /n looks like it does the job all by itself. We've lost that nice centeredness though, because we've got multiple lines. So let's just add that in. We do that using gravity and then center horizontal. There it is. Great. I think I'd like a colon there. Excellent. I'm very happy with that. You might want to play around a little bit with the colors of this lower bit there. It's not that easy to see in front of the mountain, but I'm not going to worry too much about that here. Okay, let's just have a quick look on the emulator and make sure that all looks the same. And then it's just a matter of updating our text views with the correct values. There we go, lovely. I think I might move that initial Hiker's Watch at the top down a touch. Maybe 30. Great. And maybe that initial latitude. We'll make 30 as well. Give it a bit more room. So you can see that this lining everything relative to the previous one is pretty handy, because it means if we move one down, then the rest just follow. Okay. So now this last bit, compared to all of that, should be fairly straightforward. We're going to need to create variables for all our text views. So we'll start with lat. Lung. Accuracy. Speed. Bearing. And after all that, I think I may have forgotten altitude. Yes, we definitely want altitude on there. So let's just add that one in quickly. I'll put it underneath bearing in its own little section. There we go. So 15 meters. Altitude is below bearing. And then we want the address, instead of being below bearing, to be below altitude. Margin drop of 20. Let's have a quick look. Great. Okay. Where were we? Text view altitude. And then address. Okay, and then in onCreate we'll add all of those. So lat is going to be a text view, and we're going to get it. Whoops, we're going to find it by its ID, r.id.lat. Then I'm just going to copy that, because we'll need the same thing several times. And then lung, r.id lung, accuracy, speed, bearing, altitude, and finally address. Okay, so now on location changed, we're going to want to update all of those. So let's do that down here. We have a slight problem there. I've used the same variable names for the text views as I have for the numbers. Not a problem. We'll just add in TV to each of these so that they've got text view as part of their name. Great. Okay, so if we start with latitude, then all we need is lat TV dot set text, and we want to set it to latitude and then the latitude dot toString. Simple as that. Lung TV is the same. So longitude plus lung dot toString. Altitude TV is the same. So altitude plus alt dot toString. Bearing, you've got the idea now. speed, speed to string, and then accuracy, TV dot set text, accuracy, and then accuracy to string. Now some of these have some units. Like accuracy is in meters, speed is in meters per second, bearing doesn't generally have units, altitude is in meters. I suppose you could put degrees here if you wanted, but I'm just going to leave it as is, and longitude and latitude we'll leave as well. Okay, so let's just check that before we do our address. So GeoVix 0 and 51.2. There we go. So everything's updating nicely, apart from, of course, the address. So we'll do that now, but just before, I'm going to set it so that we don't have to get a location update before we get some values. So as we've done before, we'll set a location variable equal to the location manager dot get last known location using the provider, and then we'll call on location changed with that location. And that will then update it right at the start without me having to manually change the location each time. Okay, so all that remains now is to get the information out of the address variable. And there's quite a neat way to do that if you may have found that using a bit of Googling. You may have Googled, for example, Android geocoder how to get address lines. And you would have found something like this. So first of all, notice that this is essentially an array with 3 parts, 0, 1, and 2. We don't know necessarily how many parts that will be. So what we can do is create a loop which will loop through all of them. We'll start by setting I to 0, and then we'll keep on going as long as I is less than, and then we'll get our first address again. And then from there, we'll get max address line index. So that will give us essentially the size of the array with the address lines in it, which is just what we want. And then we'll increment I each time. And then to actually get the address line, we use listaddresses.get 0 and then get address line. There it is, and we want the ith line each time. So I think we'll need an address holder. So we'll have a string address holder, and then we'll append that each time. And that's an interesting little error there. This address holder variable has not been initialized, and we can't append to it until it's been initialized. So the easiest way to initialize it is just set it to an empty string. Okay, and then finally, we just set the address text view to have a text of, and then we want the first bit to remain the same. So address \n and then the address holder. And that's it. So now, with any luck, on the very first run, we should get a correct address as well as correct information on all the other labels. There we go. Just a couple of quick things. First of all, I've forgotten to put the line break in. So we definitely want to add the line break after each of these. So we can just add that in there, like that. And I think actually you'll notice that we're missing the UK there, which is the final part of the string there. And that I think is because rather than this being like size, that shows you the number of items in the address list, it actually does what it says and gives you the maximum line index. So we actually want to have less than or equal to there so that it goes all the way up to the final index, which in our case is 2. So now we should have a nice line breaks and we've got UK at the bottom there. Brilliant. So definitely this could do with a little bit of tweaking in terms of colors and possibly even making address, for example, bold. But I'm going to leave that to you. What we've got here is a perfectly good Hiker's Watch app, which now shows all the information that a hiker could possibly want right in front of them. So I hope you enjoyed that. Now we're going to move on a little bit from GPS and location to seeing how we add a new activity and then switch from one activity to another. It's going to open whole new worlds of levels of complexity of app that we can create. So hope you're looking forward to it. We'll do that in the next lecture.